Disclaimer: this video is for school purposes only. All the videos and some of the information are gathered from the internet.
And then try to think of ways to support or disprove those ideas.
Anthropometry refers to the measurement of the human individual, an early tool of physical anthropology. It has been used for identification for the purposes of understanding human physical variation. It is a method of identification that was proposed by Al Capone's Bertillon, year 1879, to stop the difficulty of identifying repeated criminal offenders, as criminals were devising aliases to avoid deporting and harshest sentences. The time where no system of identification has ever invented, even the fingerprints identification that we are still using these days. And in year 1882, with the help of his father, he successfully developed the method, which is consisted of using caliper and other measuring devices to take 11 specific body dimensions. There are two types of categories in anthropometric measurement: static measurement of the body dimensions taken with the body in standard and still position. Dynamic: the distances are measured when the body is in motion or functional or engaged with a physical activity. Portrait parle. These two French words mean speaking likeness. Portrait parle can be defined as a rigorous system for verbal description of physical characteristics of the subject. It is based on the Bertillon method of criminal identification by measurements of the human body, and is still in practice today to some extent. A distinctive description of every feature of the face and head are especially valuable for investigation, especially when a set of the suspect's fingerprints is not available in his file. In order to recognize individuals who were repeatedly arrested, Bertillon developed means by which portraits could be sorted by common morphological characteristics, the specific shapes of the different parts of the face, and thus an individual's prior photo could be found without having to resort to browsing through large collections of portraits. This classification is known as the portrait parle or spoken portrait. There are 25 traits that is described in Bertillon card: gender, face shape, chin shape, skin color, hair type, widow's peak, color of eyebrows, eyebrow thickness, eyebrow placement, eye color, eyes distance apart, eye size, eye shape, eyelash length, mouth size, lip thickness, nose size, nose shape, nostril shape, earlobe attachment, ear pits, hairy ears, cheek freckles, forehead freckles, hair color. Occupational marks. Some marks develop due to the kind of occupation performed by an individual. Some examples are given below. Tailor, marks of pin pricks. Dishwasher, rough, suddy, and bigger. In shape due to continuous exposure to water. Truck driver, corns on palm. Forensic odontology is proper handling, examination, and evaluation of dental evidence, which will be presented in the interest of justice. The evidence that may be derived from the teeth, the age, and the identification of the person to whom the teeth may belong. Knowledge of forensic dentists requires encompassing of number of disciplines, since the dental records obtained can identify an individual or afford the information needed by the authorities to establish identification of the case. Dental identification plays an important role when identification of remains or deceased person is skeletonized, decomposed, burned, or dismembered, and is invalid by visual or fingerprint methods. Teeth act as major source of DNA because its ability to weed is done to undergo changes. Some authors suggest that teeth are better sources of DNA than skeleton bones. Dental pulp can also be used for DNA analysis and is good source for determination of blood groups. The presence of ABO blood grouping antigens in soft and hard tissues make possible to determine blood group of highly decomposed remains. The DNA from the teeth is not only acts for primary identification, but it can also be used as reference sample to relate the other tissue fragments. Forensic anthropology, the analysis of human remains for the medico-legal purpose of establishing identity. It is a multidisciplinary endeavor that applies the knowledge of biological anthropology and human osteology to cases where human remains are skeletonized, or where a detailed understanding of the growth and development, morphology, or reactive norms of the human body can assist other disciplines in positive identification. The role of the forensic anthropologist focuses on applying detailed knowledge of the development, morphology, and variation of the human body as an aid to establishing, confirming, or indeed refuting personal identification. 4 basic biological criteria form the basis of any primary identification: skeletal or developmental age, biological sex, living stature, and ancestry or racial affiliation. In practice, the anthropologist may not always be able to identify bone fragments to a particular species, but they should be able to determine whether they are human through macroscopic and/or microscopic evaluation, depending on the elements of the skeleton presented for identification and the degree of fragmentation of the bones. Forensic serology is the application of the study of blood, semen, saliva, and other body fluids to legal matters. The field generally is comprised of the detection of enzymes and antigens, as in the identification of seminal stains or blood typing, ABO and secretor status, and DNA typing. The serology section of a forensic laboratory may deal with any of all the following: blood typing, characterization of unknown stains, blood spatter analysis for crime reconstruction, paternity testing, semen identification in sexual assault cases, DNA typing for identification of victims and suspects. Initially, the samples must be identified, collected, and taken to the laboratories. This is where the series of tests on the respective fluids begins. The first step is determining if the collected sample is, in fact, a bodily fluid and what kind. DNA fingerprinting, also called DNA typing, DNA profiling, genetic fingerprinting, genotyping, or identity testing in genetics, method of isolating and identifying variable elements within the base pair sequence of DNA. A laboratory technique used to establish a link between biological evidence and a suspect in a criminal investigation. A DNA sample taken from a crime scene is compared with a DNA sample from a suspect. If the two DNA profiles are a match, then the evidence came from the suspect. Conversely, if the two DNA profiles do not match, then the evidence cannot have come from the suspect.